Well, hello children, welcome back. In my previous video, I have explained phrases and clauses and their types from chapter 17, grammar. So today I will be continuing with the same. Before moving on to the next part, let's recapitulate what we have done yesterday. So what is a phrase? The unit in a sentence comprising a group of words which helps in forming a sentence but does not make complete sense by itself is called a phrase. So when you will read out a particular sentence, you will find that you will not get the complete meaning. It will not make a complete sense by itself. That means it is a phrase. Now phrases are of 5 types: noun phrase, adjective phrase, verb phrase, prepositional phrase and adverbial phrase. Noun phrase. The head of a noun phrase is a noun. Example, my mother is happy. Head of the phrase is mother. Adjective phrase. The head of an adjective phrase is an adjective. As we know, adjectives are describing words. So Ria's sweater looks so cute. Head of the phrase cute. Verb phrase. The head of a verb phrase is the main verb. I have been reading the book since last week. So head of the phrase will be reading. Prepositional phrase. A preposition acts as the head of a prepositional phrase. Rini went to the library this morning. Head of the phrase is to. Adverbial phrase. The head of an adverbial phrase is an adverb. He walked very fast. How did he walk? He walked very fast. Adverbs, as we know, modifies the verb. Now, what is a clause? A clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a predicate. A clause may form part of a sentence or constitute a sentence by itself. And a clause has a verb in it. Now, next is the types of clauses. Now, clauses are of 2 types: independent clauses and dependent or subordinate clauses. What is an independent clause? Clauses that have a subject and a finite verb and make complete sense by themselves are called independent or main clauses. An independent clause can stand alone as a sentence and it makes a complete meaning. You can see here example. Ali drives to work early. The given sentence has a subject Ali and a finite verb drives. Since the sentence has only one finite verb, we can say that the sentence is made up only one clause. And finite verb we know is the main verb. Now dependent or subordinate clauses. Dependent clause depends on the main clause to make a complete sense. A dependent clause is also known as subordinate clause as its value in the sentence is less than the main clause. Subordinate clauses are dominated by the main clause in a sentence. A subordinate clause always depends on the main clause to get a complete meaning. Here you see Ali drives to work early. So the meaning is complete here. Clause A, that is the main clause. So that he can avoid the last minute rush is the clause B, that is the dependent clause. So this sentence is made up of 2 clauses. Clause A conveys the primary meaning. It provides information that is complete in itself. And clause B gives additional information. As clause A makes complete sense by itself and can stand alone as a sentence, it is the independent clause or the main clause in the sentence because we are getting the complete meaning. However, clause B depends on clause A to complete its meaning. Since it cannot be used on its own now so that he can avoid the last minute rush, so the meaning is incomplete. It has to depend on the main clause to get the complete meaning. So since it cannot be used on its own, it is known as a dependent clause. That means clause B. Now, the different types of dependent clauses are as follows. So today we are going to discuss the types of dependent clauses. So the types of dependent clauses are noun clauses, adjective clauses and adverbial clauses. Noun clauses. A noun clause serves as a noun in a sentence. It can act as the subject or the object or the complement of the verb or the object of the preposition in a sentence. A noun clause begins with how, that, what, when, where, whether, which, who or why. It is also known as a nominal clause. So you children, you have to remember that a noun clause always begins with how, that, what, when, where, whether, which, who or why. Examples: what I did for you. What I did for you will be the noun clause and the subject is known to all, predicate. So subject of the verb is. The guard recounted how he had saved many lives. Yes, subject. The guard recounted how he had saved many lives, noun clause plus object. So here the object of the verb is recounted. A hot cup of coffee is what I need the most. So what I need the most, noun clause, subject, a hot cup of coffee, and the complement of the verb is. So similarly in the exercise you can see identify noun clauses in the following sentences. Mention the role played by the noun clause in each sentence. One has been done for you. So number 1 has been done. One must learn, number 2, one must learn from what one experiences in life. What one experiences in life will be the noun clause and subject of the verb learn. Number 3, I know that he will come tomorrow. That he will come tomorrow will be the noun clause and the subject of the verb know. What is said cannot be taken back. What is said will be the noun clause, object of the verb taken back. So do you know who was looking for me? Here who was looking for me will be the noun clause and object of the verb know. How the magician came out of the locked box is a mystery. So complement of the verb is. I have no idea why you are so upset today. Why you are so upset today will be the noun clause and subject of the verb idea. What do you think is the cause? What do you think will be the noun clause and object of the verb is. An apple doesn't fall from the tree. The tree will be the noun clause, subject of the verb fall. So next we'll be discussing about adjective clauses. So an adjective clause is a subordinate clause that modifies a noun. It begins with a relative pronoun that, who, which, whom or whose. So adjective clause begins with that, who, which, whom or whose. It may also begin with a relative adverb. When, where or why. An adjective clause is also known as a relative clause. Examples: Ravana, who was the brother of Bibhishana, was the king of Lanka. So Ravana here is the noun. Who was the brother of Bibhishana? Adjective clause. If we ask, who was the brother of Vibhishana? Ravana. So adjective clause will be who was the brother of Vibhishana, was the king of Lanka. Baban bought the house. House will be the noun. That Rakhi sold will be adjective clause. So who bought the house? Baban. And who has sold that house? Rakhi. So as a clause must have a verb in it, we can identify the number of clauses in a sentence just by counting the number of verbs in the sentence. Since there are two verbs in both sentences, number 1, Ravana who was, and was the king of Lanka, was. So in sentence 1, and bought and sold in sentence 2. Baban bought and Rakhi sold. So bought and sold in sentence 2. We can say that both these sentences are composed of two clauses. As we know that a clause has a verb in it. Since these two sentences have two verbs, we can say that both these sentences are composed of two clauses. Now let us analyze the function of these clauses in the sentences. Sentence 1, clause 1. Ravana was the king of Lanka. Clause 2, who was the brother of Vibhishana. Sentence 2, clause 1. Baban bought the house that Rakhi sold. In both the sentences, clause 1 makes complete sense by itself. Like clause 1, Ravana was the king of Lanka. We are getting the complete meaning. Then sentence 2, Baban bought the house. Here also, clause 1 makes a complete sense by itself. Whereas clause 2 doesn't. And who was the brother of Bibhishana? That Rakhi sold. So, whereas clause 2 does not. Hence, clause 1 in both sentences is the main clause. Why? Because both the sentences, they make complete sense. Note that clause 2 in both sentences provides some additional information about the nouns in the main clause. In other words, clause 2 in both the sentences functions as an adjective, so it is an adjective clause. So underline the adjective clauses in the following sentences and circle the nouns they describe. So this is the school that nurtured me. Here noun will be the school, that nurtured me will be the adjective clause. Number 2, the newspaper will be the noun, that we read every day will be the adjective clause. Number 3, neighbor will be the noun, who has just moved in will be the adjective clause. Children will be the noun, who were lost in the forest, adjective clause. School bus is the noun, that was returning after dropping us home, adjective clause. Giraffe, noun, which is the tallest animal in the world, adjective clause. Photographs, noun, that I took last week, adjective clause. The mail, noun, that you sent yesterday, adjective clause. The lorry, noun, which was carrying the relief supplies, adjective clause. Jhumpa Lahiri, noun, who received the Pulitzer Prize for her debate work, is the adjective clause. So, next is the adverbial clauses. An adverbial clause is a clause that modifies the verb in the main clause or the subordinate clause to which it is attached. An adverbial clause acts like an adverb in a sentence answering questions like how, when, where, why, to what extent, and under what conditions. An adverbial clause begins with because, while, as, if, when, although, as, if, after, since, unless, until, before, and so on. Examples: he finished all his work, main clause, before he went to school is the adverbial clause. Lata has been dancing, main clause, since the party began, adverbial clause. So adverbial clauses act like adverbs in the following ways. Adverbs modify action words in a sentence. That means adverbs always modifies the verb action words in a sentence. So adverbial clauses modify the verb of the main clause. Just as the placement of an adverb in a sentence is somewhat flexible, an adverbial clause can be placed either before or after the main clause. So I repeat, an adjective clause is a subordinate clause that modifies a noun. Like Ravana, who was the brother of Vibhishana, adjective clause modifies the noun Ravana. Then Baban bought the house that Rakhi sold. It means adjective clause, that Rakhi sold modifies the noun house. So similarly, adverbial clause modifies the verb in the main clause. You can see here he finished all his work before he went to school. Lata has been dancing since the party began. So children, read the chapter thoroughly. Hope you have understood. If you find any difficulty or if there is any doubt, please ask me in the live class. And page 166 will be your homework. Identify the main and the adverbial clauses in the following sentences. Solution of the homework will be provided in Google Classroom. Thank you, children.